No one noticed him until he became inconvenient. Every morning he walked through the narrow streets of the community just before the sun fully rose. His steps were slow, measured, as if he was careful not to disturb the world around him. His shoulders were always slightly bent, not from age but from a weight no one else could see. He wore the same faded jacket no matter the season, buttoned all the way up as if it protected him from more than just the cold. People knew his face but not his story. To most, he was just that man, the quiet one who kept to himself, the one who always looked tired, the one who seemed to carry trouble wherever he went. He rarely spoke first. When he did, his voice was low and unsure, like someone asking permission just to exist. And when he spoke about his struggles, people stopped listening. He talked about nights without sleep, about fear that wrapped around his chest and refused to let go. He mentioned pain that came without warning, memories that returned like storms, and days when even breathing felt like work. But there were no scars on his skin, no dramatic wounds, no visible proof. So people doubted him. At the small shops, conversations paused when he approached. Someone would sigh. Another would roll their eyes. Whispers followed him like a second shadow. "There he goes again," someone muttered. "He always has a problem," another said quietly. If it was that serious, he wouldn't still be standing, they concluded. To them, struggle had to look broken to be real. At work, co-workers avoided being assigned near him. They said he brought bad energy. When tasks became difficult, they watched closely, waiting for him to fail, ready to blame his so-called weakness. When he made mistakes, they remembered. When he tried hard, they forgot. Even his attempts to explain himself worked against him. His words came out slowly, sometimes tangled. Years of holding things inside had made it hard for him to speak clearly. His thoughts felt heavy, crowded. And when he tried to describe what he was going through, it sounded confusing, even exaggerated. That confusion became proof they believed that he was lying. Neighbors shared stories about him that grew worse with every telling. Some said he liked attention. Others claimed he was lazy and used suffering as an excuse. A few even joked that he enjoyed being pitied. No one asked why a man would choose such a life. He felt the distance growing every day. When he sat alone on a bench, no one joined him. When he walked into a room, conversations lowered, then resumed without him. Smiles were polite but empty. Help was offered only in words, never in action. And still he kept going. Inside, his world was loud. His chest felt tight most days, like something heavy was pressing down on him. His thoughts raced at night, replaying moments he wished he could forget. Sleep came in short pieces, never enough to rest him. Some mornings, he stared at the wall for long minutes, trying to gather the strength to stand. But to the outside world he looked fine. That was the cruelest part. Pain that cannot be seen is easy to ignore. Once he overheard two people laughing behind him. They didn't know he could hear. "He just likes to talk about suffering," one said. "Maybe he wants sympathy," the other replied. "Everyone struggles. He's not special." Their words cut deeper than anger. They planted doubt inside him. He began to question himself. Maybe he was weak. Maybe he expected too much. Maybe his pain didn't matter because it didn't look serious enough. Those thoughts followed him home and sat beside him in the dark. He stopped sharing as much. He shortened his explanations. He nodded when people dismissed him. Each time he stayed silent, a part of him faded. But the truth did not fade. It waited. There were moments, small, frightening moments, when his body shook without reason, when his vision blurred, when fear rose so fast it stole his breath. He told himself to endure. He always had. That was what life had taught him. Survive quietly. Suffer privately. Do not burden others. The community mistook his silence for proof that everything was fine. They did not see the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was watching. They did not hear the way his breathing changed when memories returned. They did not notice how often he paused, as if steadying himself against an invisible force. To them, he was just a man who talked too much about problems and never fixed them. What they didn't know was that something inside him was slowly breaking. Every ignored word, every mocking glance, every rolled eye, it all added up. And somewhere deep within him, a truth waited, heavy, dangerous, and desperate to be seen. The kind of truth that, once revealed, could not be taken back. The kind of truth that would soon force everyone to look at him again. This time not with doubt, but with fear. Pain did not enter his life all at once. It arrived slowly, quietly, almost politely, as if asking permission before staying forever. As a child, he learned early that life was not gentle. His home was small and often tense, filled with long silences and unspoken worries. Money was always short. Some days there was enough. Other days there was not. He learned to eat less without complaining and to be grateful even when his stomach ached. He watched the adults around him struggle, their faces tired and worn down by responsibility. They loved him, but love did not protect him from fear. Nights were filled with anxious whispers, arguments kept low so children would not hear, and the constant worry of what tomorrow might bring. Then came loss. Someone important was taken from his life too early. There was no warning, no time to prepare, no proper goodbye. One day they were there and the next they were gone. The world did not stop. It did not slow down to let him understand what had happened. He was expected to be strong. He did not know how. Grief settled inside him like a heavy stone. He did not cry loudly. He did not break down in front of others. He learned to swallow his pain and continue because that was what everyone else seemed to do. But the sadness never left. It changed shape, becoming quieter, deeper, harder to explain. As he grew older, he hoped life would become easier. Instead, it tested him again. Trust came with a cost. When he finally allowed himself to rely on others, he was disappointed. People he believed in turned away when things became difficult. Promises were broken. Support vanished when it was needed most. Each betrayal taught him the same lesson. Depending on others was dangerous. Failure followed him closely after that. No matter how hard he tried, something always went wrong. A job opportunity slipped away. A plan fell apart. A chance to start fresh ended before it truly began. People began to see him as unlucky or worse, incapable. What they did not see was how much effort it took for him to keep trying. Behind every failure was exhaustion. Behind every mistake was a mind weighed down by fear and doubt. He was not careless, he was tired. Tired of fighting battles no one else seemed to notice. Over time, survival became his main skill. He learned to stay alert, to expect disappointment, to protect himself by saying less and feeling more. His body stayed tense even during calm moments. His mind never fully rested. Pain became normal. He carried it quietly, believing that if he endured long enough, things would change. But endurance has limits. The emotional scars shaped the way he spoke. When he tried to explain his struggles, words felt heavy and slow. Memories came all at once, crowding his thoughts. What made sense in his head came out unclear, broken, and confusing. To others, it sounded like excuses. They did not hear the years behind his words. They did not feel the weight he carried into every conversation. They only saw a man who could not explain himself well. And in a world that demands clear stories and quick answers, confusion is often treated as dishonesty. He began to notice the looks people gave him. Impatient, doubtful, tired. He felt them pulling away even before he finished speaking. Slowly he stopped trying to explain everything. Silence felt safer than being judged. But silence did not heal him. It trapped him inside his own thoughts. The memories he never spoke about grew louder. The fear he never shared became heavier. His body began to react to the pain he refused to show. Sleepless nights, shaking hands, sudden weakness, and moments when his chest felt too tight to breathe. He did not know how to name what was happening to him. He only knew that he was not the same person he used to be. And because he could not explain it clearly, people doubted him even more. They saw a man who spoke slowly, hesitated often, and carried sadness in his eyes. They assumed he was lazy, careless, or seeking attention. They did not imagine that his quietness was built from years of survival. By the time anyone noticed something was wrong, he had already learned to hide it. His life had shaped him into someone who endured pain silently, believing that suffering was something you carried alone. And that belief, born from loss, betrayal, and failure, was now the very thing keeping him misunderstood. The foundation of his struggle had been laid long ago, and it was beginning to crack. At first, the community did not see itself as cruel. They believed they were being practical. When the man first spoke about his struggles, some people listened. They offered quick advice, simple solutions, and hopeful words. They told him to stay strong, to think positively, to work harder. In their minds, these words were help. But when his problems did not disappear, patience slowly faded. The same stories were repeated and the same pain remained. People began to feel tired of hearing about it. They convinced themselves that if the struggle were real, it would have ended by now. And if it had not ended, then maybe the problem was the man himself. That idea spread quietly. Neighbors began to talk among themselves instead of speaking to him. Small comments turned into shared opinions. Shared opinions became facts. Soon it was widely believed that he exaggerated his suffering. They started watching him closely, not to understand but to judge. When he smiled, they thought he was pretending. When he looked tired, they thought he was lazy. When he stayed quiet, they thought he was hiding something. Every action was twisted to fit the story they had already decided to believe. At work, distance grew. Co-workers avoided partnering with him. They believed he slowed things down, brought negativity, or caused problems. When tasks were difficult, they expected him to fail. And when he did, even slightly, they remembered it. No one remembered the times he tried harder than anyone else. Opportunities were given to others. Trust was placed elsewhere. He felt himself being pushed to the edge, quietly, without confrontation. No one told him directly that he was no longer welcome. They simply made it clear through silence and exclusion. In the neighborhood, help became rare. If he asked for assistance, people found reasons to refuse. Someone else needed it more. It was not a good time. He should handle it himself. These excuses were said politely, but they carried a sharp message: you are on your own. The hardest part was watching others agree with this behavior, even when it felt wrong. Some people noticed his pain. They saw the fear in his eyes and the exhaustion in his movements. But they stayed quiet. Speaking up felt risky. Defending him might invite questions or judgment. So they followed the crowd. Silence became safer than compassion. Over time, turning away became normal. Ignoring his struggles felt easier than facing them. The community convinced itself that they were not responsible for his life or his pain. They told themselves that everyone struggles, that suffering is part of life, that he simply could not handle it. These thoughts made it easier to sleep at night. But each time someone chose not to help, something inside the community weakened. Empathy faded. Judgment grew stronger. And the man felt it. He felt the way conversations stopped when he walked by. He felt the way people avoided his eyes. He felt the empty space where support should have been. The community had decided who he was. A problem. A burden. A story they were tired of hearing. They did not see how close he was to the edge. They did not see that his strength was running out. They only saw a man who no longer fit into their idea of success or stability. And because of that, they stepped back. Each step away made his isolation deeper. Each moment of neglect pushed him further into silence. The community did not shout him away. They did not attack him openly. They did something quieter and far more dangerous. They stopped caring. And when a community stops caring, it does not notice when someone is about to fall. The man walked through their lives every day, invisible and unheard, carrying a pain that was growing heavier by the hour. Soon that weight would become too much. And when it did, the same community that turned its back would be forced to face what they had chosen not to see. For a long time, the man survived by enduring. He told himself that if he could just make it through one more day, things might change. That hope, thin and fragile, was the only thing keeping him upright. But life does not wait for tired people to recover. The pressure around him began to tighten from every side. Money became harder to stretch. Bills piled up, each one a reminder of how little room he had left to breathe. He counted coins carefully, choosing what could wait and what could not. Every decision felt like a small loss. His body started to betray him. Sleep no longer came easily. When it did, it was shallow and restless. He woke up exhausted, his muscles aching, his head heavy. Simple tasks felt difficult. His hands sometimes shook without warning. There were moments when dizziness forced him to stop and lean against a wall, pretending he was fine. He was not fine. Inside his chest, fear lived constantly. It rose without warning, squeezing his breath until he had to fight just to stay calm. His heart raced even when nothing seemed wrong. He did not understand why his body reacted this way. He only knew it was getting worse. Still, he tried to explain. He spoke carefully, choosing his words, hoping this time someone would listen. He talked about feeling unwell, about being overwhelmed, about not being able to continue like this. But his explanations only created more distance. People heard complaints, not warnings. They heard excuses, not cries for help. Some told him to toughen up. Others suggested he was imagining things. A few hinted that he was simply looking for a way out of responsibility. Their responses left him feeling small. Humiliation followed him everywhere. At work, when he struggled to keep up, eyes turned toward him with quiet judgment. He felt himself shrinking under their gaze, trying to move faster, trying not to make mistakes, trying not to be noticed. Every failure confirmed what they already believed. At home, the silence grew heavier. He sat alone in the dark, replaying the day in his mind. Each ignored comment, each doubtful look, each moment of weakness repeated itself until sleep finally claimed him. Hope began to fade. He stopped planning for the future. Dreams felt pointless when survival already demanded everything he had. His world narrowed to getting through the next hour, then the next day. Yet even as he struggled to stand, something deeper was happening. There were signs, clear signs, that something serious was wrong. His strength disappeared without warning. His focus slipped. Sometimes his vision blurred and the room seemed to tilt. He felt moments of intense fear followed by deep numbness, as if his emotions had shut down to protect him. But no one noticed. Or maybe they noticed and chose not to look closely. The man grew quieter than ever. His shoulders slumped further. His eyes lost their light. He moved like someone carrying a burden too heavy to set down. Inside he felt close to breaking. There were moments when he wondered how much longer he could endure being unseen. How much pain a person could carry before something inside finally gave way. He tried to remind himself that people did not understand because they did not know the full story. But explaining felt impossible now. He was too tired, too drained, too afraid of being dismissed again. Silence returned, stronger than before. The pressure continued to build. Each day added weight to an already fragile foundation. Each night stole what little strength he had left. His body and mind were no longer working together. They were both exhausted, both overwhelmed. And deep down he sensed it. Something was coming. A moment he could not avoid. A consequence he could not stop. A breaking point that had been forming for a long time. The signs were there for anyone willing to see them. But the community had already decided he was exaggerating. They did not see a man standing at the edge of collapse. They saw a problem they were tired of dealing with. And as the man took another step forward, barely holding himself together, the ground beneath him began to crack. What would happen next was no longer in his control. The moment came quietly, the way most important moments do. There was no loud announcement, no dramatic sign to warn anyone that this was the turning point. It happened on an ordinary day in a familiar place, surrounded by people who believed they already knew the man well enough to ignore him. That day he did something he had avoided for a long time. He spoke with urgency. His voice was still calm, but something in his eyes had changed. There was fear there, real fear. He tried to explain that something was wrong, that he could not continue like this, that he needed help before things got worse. He did not beg. He did not exaggerate. He warned. But warnings only matter when people believe the person giving them. Some people barely looked up. Others exchanged knowing glances, already tired of hearing the same story. A few smiled in that empty, patient way people use when they think someone is being dramatic. They had heard his struggles before. This felt no different to them. One person laughed softly and shook their head. Another sighed and walked away. Someone else accused him of trying to avoid responsibility, suggesting he was creating a problem where there was none. The words hit him like cold water. He felt his chest tighten, his breath grow shallow. Still he tried to explain. He spoke about the signs he was experiencing, the fear he could not control, the exhaustion that never left. His words came out uneven, rushed, tangled by panic. That only made things worse. To them, confusion meant dishonesty. Emotion meant manipulation. Urgency meant exaggeration. They dismissed him quickly. Some told him to calm down. Some told him to stop overthinking. Some told him everyone felt that way sometimes. And just like that, the moment passed. He stood there, feeling smaller than he ever had. His warning fell to the ground, ignored and forgotten. The space around him felt heavy, thick with disbelief. The damage was not loud, but it was deep. Being dismissed did not just hurt, it broke something inside him. It told him that even at his most honest, his truth meant nothing. That no matter how serious things became, he would still be doubted. Shame flooded him. He questioned himself again. Maybe he really was imagining things. Maybe he had pushed too hard. Maybe he deserved the doubt because he could not explain himself clearly. That doubt settled inside him like poison. He walked away quietly, his steps slower than before. No one followed. No one asked if he was okay. Life continued around him as if nothing important had happened. But something important had happened. That was the last time he tried to warn anyone. After that day he stopped reaching out. He stopped sharing how bad things had become. He returned to silence, believing it was safer than being dismissed again. The irony was cruel. The truth he had tried to explain was closer than anyone realized. The danger he sensed was real. The signs he noticed were not imaginary. But disbelief had blinded them. That moment, small, forgettable to others, became a turning point for him. It confirmed his greatest fear, that he was truly alone in this. And when a person feels completely alone, hope begins to fade quickly. The community moved on, confident they had handled the situation well. They told themselves they had listened enough, that he would be fine, that people like him always were. They did not know that something inside him was reaching its limit. They did not know that by dismissing him, they had removed the last support holding him together. And as the man disappeared into the crowd, carrying his pain in silence once more, The truth followed closely behind him, waiting for a moment when it could no longer be ignored. That moment was coming. After the day he was dismissed, the man changed in ways that were hard to ignore, though most people still tried. He became quieter, if that was even possible. His movements slowed, as though every step required careful planning. He stopped explaining himself altogether. When people spoke to him, he answered with short words or simple nods, conserving what little energy he had left. At first, the community saw this as improvement. He's finally stopped complaining, some said. Looks like he figured things out, others assumed. But silence was not healing him. It was draining him. The truth began to surface in small, unsettling ways. Someone noticed he was losing weight, too quickly. His clothes hung loosely on his frame, his face looked thinner, sharper. Dark circles settled beneath his eyes, giving him a permanently tired look. He seemed older somehow, as if time had begun to rush through him. At work, his focus slipped. He stared at tasks longer than usual, struggling to complete things that once came easily. Sometimes he froze, as if his mind had gone blank. When coworkers spoke to him, he reacted slowly, startled, like someone pulled suddenly from deep water. At first they joked about it, but jokes slowly turned into uneasy glances. There were moments, small but frightening, when his body gave him away. His hands shook when he tried to lift something simple. His breathing became uneven without warning. Once he had to sit down suddenly, his face pale, sweat breaking across his forehead. Someone saw him and frowned. "He doesn't look right," they said quietly. Still no one said it out loud. The first crack in the community's certainty came when someone heard him collapse behind a closed door. It was not dramatic. No shouting. Just a dull sound, followed by silence. When he reappeared later, he brushed it off with a weak nod, refusing help. But the memory stayed with the person who heard it. Others began to notice things too. He started missing days. When he did show up, he arrived late and left early, moving as if every step hurt. His eyes seemed distant, unfocused, as though he were constantly fighting something unseen. Whispers changed. They were no longer filled with mockery. They carried confusion now. Concern. Doubt, not about him but about themselves. "Maybe it's worse than we thought," someone murmured. "I've never seen him like this," another admitted. The truth was rising, and it made people uncomfortable. Evidence appeared that could not be explained away. A medical paper left behind by mistake. A prescription slip tucked into a pocket. Bruises from falls he could not remember. A trembling that refused to stop. These were not excuses. They were signs. A few people began to question their assumptions. They replayed moments in their minds, his warnings, his exhaustion, his quiet desperation. They remembered how quickly they had dismissed him. Guilt crept in slowly. But the truth did not rush. It revealed itself piece by piece, like light creeping through a crack in the wall. Tension filled the air. People started watching him not with judgment but with fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of what might happen if they continued to ignore what was right in front of them. And still the man said nothing. He had learned his lesson. Explaining only brought doubt. Warning only brought dismissal. He focused on surviving the day, even as his strength continued to fade. The silence made his suffering heavier. One evening, someone saw him struggling to stand, gripping a wall as if it were the only thing holding him upright. His face was drained of color, his breathing shallow. When help was offered, he shook his head slowly and forced himself to move on. That image stayed with them. Conversations shifted. People spoke in lower voices now. They wondered out loud what they had missed, what they had ignored, what they had chosen not to see. The truth had reached a point where it could no longer be denied. Something was seriously wrong. And the community felt it. They felt it in the tension that followed him wherever he went. In the way people paused to watch him longer than before. In the unease that replaced certainty. The man stood at the center of it all, exhausted, fragile, and unaware that the walls of disbelief were finally beginning to crack. But awareness came too late. The signs were no longer subtle. His body was failing him in ways that could not be hidden much longer. Every step, every breath, every moment was borrowed time. And as the community slowly began to realize the depth of his suffering, one frightening truth became clear. They were running out of time. The truth was no longer waiting quietly. It was preparing to force itself into the open. The day it happened began like any other. The sky looked the same. The streets were busy with familiar faces moving through familiar routines. People spoke, laughed, argued, and hurried along, unaware that this ordinary day was about to fracture into something unforgettable. The man stepped out among them, moving slower than usual. His body felt heavy as if gravity itself had grown stronger overnight. Each breath took effort. His vision blurred at the edges, but he forced himself forward. He had learned not to stop, not to draw attention. Attention had never brought him help. Around him, people noticed, but only briefly. He looks tired, someone thought. He always does, another dismissed. No one imagined this would be the last time they would see him standing. As he moved through the crowd, the pressure inside him rose sharply. His heart pounded hard and fast, beating like it was trying to escape his chest. Sweat broke across his skin even though the air was cool. The ground beneath him seemed to shift, tilting just enough to make him stumble. He reached out instinctively, grabbing onto nothing. Then his legs gave way. The sound was sudden, a heavy thud that cut through the noise of the street. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Laughter died instantly. Heads turned as one. He was on the ground. At first no one moved. There was a moment, short but deadly, where people waited for him to stand back up, to brush himself off, to prove once again that nothing was really wrong. That moment stretched longer than it should have. But he did not move. His body lay still, twisted awkwardly, breath shallow and uneven. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at something no one else could see. Panic spread quickly. Someone shouted for help. Another rushed forward. Hands trembled as they tried to wake him, to speak to him, to understand what was happening. This was not exaggeration. This was not attention-seeking. This was real. Fear replaced doubt in an instant. People crowded around him, their faces pale, their voices urgent. Some recognized him now, not as the man who complained but as the man they had ignored. His body shook violently. His breathing sounded wrong, broken, strained. The signs were undeniable. Whatever he had been warning them about had finally arrived. And it had arrived in public. Sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder with every second. Time slowed, stretching painfully as people waited, helpless, watching the consequences of their disbelief unfold before them. Someone whispered his name. Another covered their mouth, eyes wide with horror. Memories rushed back all at once. His quiet warnings, his exhausted face, his shaking hands, the way he had slowly disappeared before their eyes. They saw it now. Too late. When help finally arrived, the scene was heavy with shock and guilt. The man was lifted carefully, his body fragile, his strength completely gone. As he was taken away, silence followed him like a shadow. No one spoke. No one looked away. The truth stood naked among them. This was not a man who lied about his struggles. This was a man who had been breaking in silence. The realization hit hard and fast. Some people felt their stomachs drop. Others felt a sharp sting of shame. A few could not stop shaking. They had doubted him. They had dismissed him. And now they were watching the cost of that choice being carried away. The community did not return to normal after that. The street felt different. Quieter. Heavier. As if the air itself carried blame. People avoided each other's eyes, unsure of what to say. No explanation could erase what they had just seen. No excuse could soften the truth. They had been wrong. And the evidence was undeniable. That moment changed everything. The man's suffering was no longer invisible. It was no longer confusing or inconvenient. It had forced itself into the open, demanding acknowledgement, demanding responsibility. For the first time, the community did not ask whether he had been telling the truth. They asked how they had failed to see it. And as the echoes of sirens faded into the distance, one terrible understanding settled over them all. Some truths do not wait forever. And when they finally reveal themselves, they leave no room for denial, only regret. After he was taken away, the community was left behind with something far heavier than silence. Guilt. The place where he had fallen no longer felt ordinary. People stood there longer than necessary, staring at the ground as if it might offer answers. Conversations were short and uneasy. No one laughed. No one rushed to leave. It was as if time itself had slowed to force them to think. The first feeling was shock. People replayed the scene in their minds, the way his body collapsed, the sound it made, the look in his eyes. That image returned again and again, refusing to fade. It followed them home. It waited for them in quiet rooms. It appeared when they closed their eyes. Then shock turned into realization. They remembered the signs they had ignored. The warnings they had brushed aside. The moments they had laughed, sighed, or turned away. Each memory felt sharp now, cutting deeper with every replay. Some tried to defend themselves. He never explained it properly, one person said. We all struggle, another insisted. No one knew it was this serious, someone added. But those excuses felt weak. Deep down they knew the truth. They had chosen comfort over compassion. It was easier to doubt him than to accept that someone in their community was suffering so deeply. Regret settled in slowly. It showed in the way people avoided the places he used to sit, in the way his name was spoken quietly now with care, in the way eyes lowered when someone mentioned his struggles. Some people cried when they were alone. Others lay awake at night, their thoughts restless. They imagined different endings, moments where they had listened, moments where they had helped, moments where they had taken his words seriously. But imagination could not change reality. The weight of realization pressed down on everyone differently. For some it came as shame. They felt exposed, seen by their own conscience. For others it came as fear, fear of what might happen next, fear of being blamed, fear of facing him again. And for a few it came as denial. They refused to accept responsibility. They told themselves that what happened was unavoidable, that he was already too broken, that nothing they did could have changed the outcome. But even denial could not fully protect them. The truth was everywhere now. It sat in the empty spaces he left behind. It echoed in the silence that replaced his quiet presence. It lingered in the looks people gave each other, looks filled with shared guilt and unspoken questions. They asked themselves things they had never asked before. Why was it so easy to doubt him? Why did we wait for proof instead of listening? Why did we only believe when it was too late? The emotional cost of disbelief became clear. By choosing not to care, they had allowed a man to suffer alone. By choosing judgment over empathy, they had become part of the pain they once denied. The community had always believed that serious problems looked obvious, that real suffering announced itself loudly, that pain demanded attention. Now they knew better. Some struggles are quiet. Some pain hides behind tired eyes and slow steps, and ignoring it does not make it disappear. As night fell, the community felt changed, though no one spoke it aloud. The certainty they once held was gone. In its place was something heavier, responsibility. They could not undo what had happened. They could not erase their words or their silence. All they could do was sit with the truth. And that truth was this: they had not just failed to believe a man. They had failed to be human. He woke slowly, his body aching in ways that words could not fully describe. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and uncertainty, a stark contrast to the streets where he had been dismissed, ignored, and judged. The steady beep of monitors and the soft footsteps of nurses were a strange comfort after so many months of silence and suspicion. For the first time in a long time, people were watching him, not with judgment, not with doubt, but with concern. Their eyes were careful, hesitant, almost afraid of what they might see. And yet, despite the attention, he felt a strange emptiness. Relief was there, yes, but it was tangled with exhaustion, frustration, and a quiet, enduring sorrow. He remembered the day everything had collapsed. The way the ground had felt beneath him, the blur of voices, the frantic hands reaching for him. The memory still made his chest tighten. He had survived, yes, but at a cost. The weight of months, maybe years, of ignored pain, of disbelief, of isolation, had left marks deeper than any bruise or wound could show. Now, as he looked at the faces around him, faces filled with guilt, fear, and tentative remorse, he felt a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. Finally, people saw him. Finally, they understood that he had not been exaggerating, that his struggle had been real, that his suffering was not imagined. But being believed came too late to erase the months he had endured alone. Too late to undo the humiliation, the whispers, the laughter, the constant doubt that had followed him everywhere. Being finally seen did not make the isolation vanish. It did not heal the scars. He tried to speak once, but the words felt heavy in his throat. How could he explain the quiet battles fought in darkness? The nights spent staring at walls, questioning if anyone cared? The small victories no one ever noticed. The mornings he managed to get out of bed, the meals he forced himself to eat, the work he completed despite exhaustion and fear? How could he make people understand without anger, without bitterness? And yet he did not want to hate them. Not completely. He had survived because he still believed in human decency, even when others failed him. He had survived because he had no other choice. The community's remorse was tangible. Some knelt beside his bed, offering quiet apologies. Others avoided his gaze, unable to reconcile their guilt with their desire for forgiveness. He could see in their eyes the realization that they had underestimated him, that their judgment had caused pain beyond what they could measure. He understood their struggle too. Understanding did not mean excusing. He knew it was easier for people to dismiss what they could not see. He knew fear and conformity often outweighed empathy. He knew that human nature made it simpler to look away than to face suffering honestly. Still, understanding did not heal him. He spent hours reflecting on everything that had led to this point. The warnings no one heeded. The small signs that went unnoticed. The moments when help could have arrived but didn't. The countless hours of silence and loneliness. And somewhere in the quiet, he realized that surviving had required more courage than most would ever recognize. Being at the center of the storm meant he had lived through the eye of disbelief, the winds of judgment, and the flood of neglect. He had endured them all, often without anyone knowing, often without anyone caring. And though the world now saw him clearly, the scars inside would remain long after the physical danger passed. Yet even with the weight of all he had endured, he felt a spark, a quiet, persistent spark, of something he had almost forgotten: hope. Not hope for pity or validation, but hope that he could begin to live without constantly defending his existence. That he might finally exist in the world without being doubted. That the future, however fragile, could belong to him in a way it never had before. He closed his eyes for a moment and let himself breathe. The storm had passed for now. The community had been forced to confront its mistakes, and the world had been reminded that invisible struggles are often the deepest. But the man knew one thing clearly: surviving was not just about being seen. Surviving was about enduring, about carrying on when no one believes you, about holding your truth inside until the moment it finally matters. And he had done that. The days that followed were quiet, almost painfully still. The man lay in the hospital bed, recovering physically, but his mind was far from calm. The community had seen the truth, and their remorse was obvious. They approached him with gentle words, tentative apologies, and awkward attempts at connection. Some brought small gifts or letters. Others simply watched, afraid to say the wrong thing. He listened. He heard everything. But hearing did not mean forgiving. Forgiveness, he realized, was not something given lightly, not something earned with a simple apology or a fleeting show of concern. It was a choice that demanded clarity, boundaries, and the courage to face the pain that had been inflicted. He thought about all the days he had endured alone. The nights when fear and exhaustion had taken over, when he had wanted someone, anyone, to simply notice. He remembered the disbelief, the laughter, the whispered judgments, the people who turned away. Those memories were sharp, like glass under his skin, impossible to ignore. Could he forgive them? Part of him wanted to. Forgiveness might bring relief, might lift the heaviness from his chest, might allow him to exist in the world without carrying every moment of their doubt like a chain. Forgiveness could be freedom, but only if it was earned. Only if it was honest. He watched as individuals approached him, some with tears, some with quiet shame, some with words that stumbled over themselves in their nervousness. He studied their faces, searching for sincerity, for truth. He wanted to believe they felt the weight of what they had done. He wanted to see that they understood the consequences of their disbelief. But even when sincerity appeared, he felt something else: caution. Forgiveness did not mean returning to life as it had been. It did not mean forgetting or pretending everything was fine. It meant acknowledging the pain, setting boundaries, and deciding who could be allowed back into his world, and how. He realized that distance sometimes is a form of protection. Walking away is not always cruelty, it can be a shield for the soul. And after so many months of being dismissed, he understood that he needed space to rebuild, to regain strength, to reclaim his sense of self without the weight of doubt pressing on him. Yet distance did not have to mean hatred. He could forgive without returning. He could release anger without erasing the lessons he had learned. Forgiveness could coexist with caution, with boundaries, with self-respect. In the days that followed, he began to speak quietly to those who reached out. He set limits, choosing when and how to engage. He allowed himself small acts of connection, small acknowledgments of remorse, but he never allowed the past to be erased. He was careful, measured, protective of the fragile hope that had survived everything. The community, for its part, began to learn. They learned that apologies alone could not undo neglect. They learned that trust is fragile and must be earned. And slowly, painfully, they began to understand that forgiveness is not a gift given to them. It is a journey that the man chooses for himself. He had survived the storm. He had faced disbelief, neglect, and indifference. And now he faced a new choice: to forgive, to distance, or to find a balance between the two. In that balance, he realized, lay the truest form of power. The power to decide who has a place in your life and who does not. The power to protect your heart while still holding space for humanity. The power to move forward without erasing the lessons of the past. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something close to peace.